Hey everybody, so in this video what we're going to do is we're going to talk about vertical remixing within Wwise. Now in the last video we talked about how to use RTPCs, real-time parameter controls, to control the layers coming in and out. And in this video we're going to use states through a switch container to do that instead. And the reason you might want to do this is you have a little bit more control of the fade times for when your music fades in and how long the fade time is. Using RPTCs, the game actually can control that, which may make for a bad fade or a lousy fade from a musical point of view, from a composer's point of view. So I'm going to create a new Wwise project. I'm going to call it Wwise Layers and Switch Container. I'm going to put that on my desktop. I don't need any of these plugins, so I'll go ahead and hit OK. And go ahead and launch into Wwise. The first thing I always want to do is go into my interactive music layout. I'm going to go to my audio tab and I'm going to go ahead and start creating music segments. Now you've done this before, although you may not have realized it. You've used switch containers, and basically we're going to use switch containers to control our layers within the project. So let's go ahead and go find our raw materials, and I have 3 layers here. The first one I'm going to go ahead and drag into my default work unit, and I'm going to import that, and that will create a new music segment for me. I'm going to go ahead and call it music segment 1 layer. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag it in again to the default work unit. And at the default work unit, I'm going to create a new segment. Now import, and it says, oh, I already have this. Should you replace it or keep the original? It doesn't really matter. You can just go ahead and import it again. The key thing is I want to have basically 3 different segments, one with 1 layer, one with 2 layers, and one with 3 layers. So I'm kind of building the raw materials for this. So I'm going to call this music segment 2 layers. Now I don't have 2 layers in it yet until I actually go over here and drag my second layer into that same layer. Then it says when I import, add a new music track to that segment. You say yeah. Okay, so now I have 2 layers in this one, and then I'll do that again for the 3rd layer. So I'll first drag in the first layer, go ahead and rename it. Remember, it's going to ask me, do you want to replace the original? I am for now, but you don't need to. I'm going to call this music segment 3 layers, and then go ahead and drag in my other 2 layers that I have here. So dragging layer 2 in, creating a new track. It also, again, already has that file, so it's asking you, do you want to replace it? I'm going to say yes. And then lastly, I have my 3rd track here, and add a new track. Okay, so sadly, it has reordered them in alphabetical order, but basically in this one we have 2 layers, and then in the last segment that we have 3 layers in that segment. Okay, so let's we also need to create a playlist for each one of these in the switch container. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead to 1 layer here, right click, new parent, because it's above the segment. I create a new playlist, and I'll just call it, let's call it playlist 1. We'll do playlist 1, 2, and 3. Remember, when you create a playlist, you have to drag, it's a 2-step process. One, you got to create it in the hierarchy here, but you also have to then drag it in. It's a 2-step process, and so I'm setting the loop count to infinite, and I'll do that for these other 2 as well. So I'll go ahead and create a new parent, which is a playlist. I'll call this playlist 2, and in the playlist 2, basically I have, the wrong thing. I'm going to call this playlist 3 because it has 3 in it. That's where the alphabetical thing did not help me at all. Alright, so in playlist 3, drag the 3 segments in to the playlist, change my loop count to infinite. Then lastly, I need to create another playlist for the one that has 2 layers in it. So music playlist container, and I will go ahead and call this playlist 2. Alright, so we're getting close. It doesn't refresh that until I sort of click off of it and then click back on it, and then it will refresh the name here. By the way, I still need to drag my 2-layer segment into the playlist itself and change the loop count. There we go. All right, I'm going to save my project. All right, we have one last step, which is to create our switch container. We need our switch to encompass all 3 of our playlists. And so we'll click on all 3, we'll select all 3. Then we'll create a new parent, which is actually our music switch container. All right, so there's our switch container. And we're going to need a way for the game to communicate back to Wwise. So we'll go up to the Game Syncs tab. We'll create a state group for this. So new state group. This is the way that the game is going to send data over to our Wwise interactive music structure. And we'll call this distance to enemies. And instead of having a continuously variable number where we have, 100 meters or 50 meters or 75 meters or 10 meters away, we're going to create 3 states. We're going to create one state called close, another one called another state called medium, and another one called far. So we have 3 states, close, medium, far, which we are going to map to our 3 layers. At far, we only want 1 layer, medium, we want 2, and then close, we want 3 layers. So we go back over to our audio tab, into our switch container. Sometimes you have to click off of it and click back on it to get the properties to appear. Then I'm going to select the state group distance to enemies and map that each playlist. So playlist 1 is going to get mapped to far away. Playlist 2, which has 2 layers, gets mapped to medium, and playlist 3 gets mapped to close. All right, we have one more thing to do and then we'll wrap up this video. In our switch container, we need to go to transitions and set up our transitions. So I'm going to just do one generic transition to cover all 3 of these, but you can customize each one of them. I want the exit, basically when we're going from one to the next, when we're going from far to medium, we want to exit the source, and we want to exit the source immediately. We don't want to wait to the end of the cue. We don't want to wait to the end of the segment. We want that to happen immediately. Now, we're going to work with the fade time in a minute, but let's talk about the destination. When we're going to the next playlist, right, the one with either 2 or 3 layers in it, then we want that to not begin over at the very beginning. We want it to start at the same time as the original playing segment. So that will actually allow us to, if the first segment is, first segment's at 30 seconds, we want the next segment to begin at 30 seconds. So we have a nice crossfade that basically maps across each one of these different playlists. So it will jump in at the place that it left off. All right, then we just adjust our fade times. So I'm going to edit my fade times, and basically what I'm going to do is we're going to exit the source and begin the destination, and let's do a nice long time, a 4-second fade. And we don't want it to fade out and the next one begin. We want it to actually fade out after after the piece is going on. So let's go ahead and change this to 4. Now I could make this more of a fade that you might do in a program, say like Pro Tools. So we could change the curve to say something like this and actually change the difference so that this one over here is set to, we'll offset it to 2. So it looks like this. So we're going to fade down on this one and fade up the other one. So on the fade in time on this, what we'll do is set it up so that we also have a 4-second fade. We'll change the curve to equal power and change this one to -2. So it's fading up while the other one's fading out. Save, and let's go ahead and test it. I want to make sure, right now I'm pinned on segment layer 1 layer, but I want to actually play my switch container, so I'll just unpin it. Now I'm selected on my switch. I'll go to state far away first and hit play. Okay, so it's playing, and now I want to go into my medium state. And it fades in nicely. It faded out the first one and faded in this next one. Now it's a little weird because it is fading between them, but it's hard to hear the fade because the pieces of music are the same. But it's a way to kind of go through this in a different way than RPTCs would. Then I go to close, and that works really nicely. And then I go to far away, and we have that nice long fade time across 4 seconds. Now, the advantage of using this is that I'm able to customize those fade times between my different playlists. And that makes this a little bit more of an advantage to the composer because the composer can really customize those fades. The RPTCs, it's a little bit more challenging to get those to work properly if the enemies suddenly appear or the game itself, the AI in the game is actually putting the enemies around you all at one time and they're close distance. It's going to pop in those layers. This way you can actually get it so that you can really customize those fade times. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Take care.